started with just a round of introduction, and then while we're waiting for other folks coming. So welcome everyone to the session about resilience of solar and storage. I'm Becky Lee. I'm a senior associate at RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, and I have two really fabulous panelists with me today, Dawn and Michael. Dawn, Michael, do you want to give a brief introduction and also what brought you to this session today?
Sure, I'll jump in. So I am really excited to talk about valuing solar and storage. I'm the CEO of MCE and have been working with MCE since before we launched, since around 2005, started working on forming MCE. And we are really excited about some of our recent programs to help the community with resiliency issues. And so that's what I'm looking forward to talking about today.
About those project experience you have. Michael?
Great, yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Michael Norbeck. I lead business development for grid services at Sunrun. We're the largest solar battery storage and energy services company on the residential side in the US. We are seeing resiliency be more and more top of mind for customers of ours all over the country, with grid outages and other supply disruptions being ever more common. We're really excited at the opportunity to continue bringing clean energy solutions, bill savings, and again, backup power to customers, and thinking creatively about strategic partnerships for engaging the widest and most diverse array of customers we can in programs and clean energy opportunities. So yeah, appreciate you guys joining us and looking forward to a really exciting conversation today.
So just a little bit housekeeping. I know this is the section where we cannot let you guys talk on the spot, but we're really welcome all the attendees, and you're welcome to write down all your questions on the right-hand side if you're new to Optin. And then we'll probably start with a high-level introduction and share some experience with our panelists, but then we will quickly turn to the Q&A section and focus on the questions that you're most interested in about the grid resilience from solar and storage. So with that, Dawn and Michael, I guess we can probably start with a little bit more of your sharing experience, and particularly I'm curious, in your work, how did you come across the issue of the value of resilience, particularly from solar and storage? What were the challenges or the lessons learned that you might have that you want to share with those audience?
Yeah, Dawn, do you want to get us started?
Sure, happy to. So yeah, I'll say a little bit about MCE to start off. So we're a community choice program, a community choice aggregation program. And some of you may be familiar with what that means, others may not, but basically we're a local government energy provider that is the default provider for all the folks in our communities. We were the first community choice program that launched in California, but there are now 22 community choice programs across the state serving customers. We're serving about 470,000 customer accounts, which is about 1.5 million folks in 4 counties, Napa, Marin, Solano, and Contra Costa County. And we serve all customer types, residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, municipal. And the reason that we formed back in 2002 was to reduce the carbon footprint in our communities, provide more choice for customers around more renewable energy products. And we started out buying a lot of solar and getting a lot of solar into our power supply mix. We also, a couple of years after launching, we got a couple of local solar incentive programs going, a feed-in tariff program and some local energy efficiency programs for customers. And over the years, before long, we started to see so much solar coming onto the grid that the value of our solar was diminishing a bit, and our ability to use it during the peak times was also diminishing a bit. And we began to see a real need for storage to be able to kind of suck up those solar electrons in the middle of the day and then get them back onto the grid in the evening. And that has become a really important need across the state, and soon is likely to be a need, across the country. At the same time, what we've seen in recent years is more emergency scenarios. We're having power outages, and that's in part due to the climate change related wildfires and drought that we've seen. We also tend to see more flooding, more extreme storm events. And so emergencies where power goes out is more likely to be happening. And because we're a local government agency set up to serve in our communities, we really wanted to be able to help create more resiliency around those emergency power outage situations, especially for our most vulnerable customers and our critical facilities like fire stations and community shelters. So we launched a program to help customers that already have solar get storage incorporated onto their site. In other cases, we've looked at ways to get solar and storage added for vulnerable customers and critical facilities. And we have a program going now that pays for most, if not all, of the installation cost for a solar storage combo while leveraging the SCHIP funds, the Self-Generation Incentive Program funds that are available in the state. So we're hoping to bring as much of those incentive dollars to bear in our community as possible to create more resiliency. And really the last thing I'll say is kind of the two ways that we value solar plus storage is, one is for emergencies. So when there's an emergency, we want folks to be able to keep the lights on, keep their medical devices powered up, keep the refrigerator on so that their food doesn't go bad. That's a really important need for solar plus storage. And then when there's not an emergency, that solar storage combo has a really great value as well to help balance out and align our load and our generation shape so that customers are able to put energy onto the grid with their solar, or suck it up with those batteries in the middle of the day and then get it onto the grid in the evening when we see the big need for energy. And that allows us to rely much less on fossil generating sources of power in the evening hours. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Oh my goodness, you said all the smart stuff. I got nothing to add. I mean, I was actually really excited. I mean, we know a lot about MCE. MCE's been a leader in the community choice aggregation space in California and really nationally. So I want to give them a lot of credit for their vision and their track record. It was really exciting to me to hear, Dawn's articulation of MCE's vision around the solar and storage space and the customer experience. It's very much aligned with ours. We're really focused on bringing customers clean energy solutions and choice and affordable power that helps, them mitigate potential utility rate increases over time, and also the resiliency and backup power option, right? One of our core markets, and this is where I focus mainly, is in California. And as Dawn, mentioned, public safety power shutoffs are becoming more and more a fact of life. Other grid service disruptions are becoming more and more a fact of life. We think a lot about how do we make the home a place of comfort and safety in the event of a grid outage? How do we help folks understand that when they are home, they're going to have power on, they're going to have their fridge on, their lights on? This has become more and more important in the context of course, COVID, which is making everybody's life difficult when you have kids homeschooling and you have folks working from home. So we're seeing, we've seen a lot of interest historically in the resiliency and backup power product solution, and it's becoming more and more, I would say, prominent for us. Our focus really is on the, historically has been on the single family residential side. That's kind of our core competency. We have a growing and very active multifamily solar and storage business as well, with a particular focus in California, especially on low and moderate income multifamily customers. So in a case like this, we would sign kind of a power purchase agreement or a lease with the property owner, for example, but the customers in the building that live there would get the benefits of bill savings and resiliency from the solar and storage. So that's kind of a cool instrument we've developed. We actually have that kind of product and service deployment in place with multiple community choice aggregators now. And that for us is a way to kind of expand the conversation around access and equity in the solar and storage and clean energy kind of broader dialogue. I think the solar industry has done a lot of talking around extending the benefits of these clean energy solutions and benefits to a diverse range of customers. And we haven't done as great a job of making that a reality. So, us focusing on the affordable multifamily segment and other folks in kind of a related vein has been, we think, a way to kind of put our values into action. And it's really exciting to be able to partner with CCAs on kind of that mission and that drive.
Really ideas and also project experience. Thanks for sharing. I want to probably dive in a little bit more on particularly the idea that Dawn you mentioned, and also Michael touched upon, is the value of grid of resilience doesn't only come from the time when there's grid outage, but it could also be coming from the time when the grid is still operating, but there are potentially other values that could be coming and kind of improve the economics of the solar plus storage project. So is there any particular ideas or projects that you can think of that kind of how you think of valuation or make the business case for, or innovative business case for the adoption of solar plus storage in the context of the resilience values?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is on that note is we have seen a lot of solar curtailment happening in California during certain times of the year. We have a lot of solar in our power supply portfolio, both localized within our community's footprint and also statewide. There are many times when there's too much solar on the grid and not enough demand to use up all of that energy. And so that solar sometimes gets curtailed and isn't even used. Since we're talking about value, I'll point out that we often have to pay for that energy, even when it's not delivered. We're still having to pay the supplier, due to the way contracts are set up. And so it's in our best interest, and it's in California's best interest, to make sure we're using those solar electrons as much as we can. If we can create more demand by having batteries online that are absorbing that solar energy during the daytime, that will really help reduce curtailment, or maybe even eliminate curtailment. Then the second problem that we're seeing in California with so much solar generation is that in the evening, as the sun is going down, demand really tends to spike. Customers are continuing to use energy into those evening hours. In some cases, energy use even goes up as people are turning on lights, doing laundry, washing, running the dishwasher. Opening the fridge a lot. All of those things create energy demand, and there's no solar power to rely on in the evening. Sometimes there's some extra wind generation during the morning and evening, and that can help. But typically what happens is we have to rely on natural gas and fossil resources. I should also mention, not to leave out the geothermal resources there, which is great. Those continue to produce, and hydroelectric resources can sometimes help with that. But by and large, the needs in the evening hours typically fall to fossil resources. So if we have some batteries that are ready to dispatch in the evening because they've been charged up by the sun, we're able to reduce our carbon footprint and not curtail the solar. So it's really a win-win solution. And that's where we're seeing the need going and where we see the value.
I think that's a great point. I think, Dawn, you really, articulately described the kind of archetypal duck curve scenario that we're seeing in California. And it's kind of a funny problem to have. It's like it's the success of the prior generation's clean energy policy, or the last decade's clean energy policy, turning into something of a challenge, right? So we have all the right motivations, let's get clean energy on the grid, but then you don't figure out a way to balance that with the way load's going, and you end up in a scenario where you have more solar than you need in the middle of the day. So I think, again, Dawn raised a great point on, how can batteries be useful for helping us address these challenges, right? We want to make sure we are using the solar when it's useful, and not, making an uneconomic choice for the sake of grid reliability and curtailing an asset that's producing at a zero marginal cost. Like, why would you do it? So one of the cool things about a distributed asset, like a behind the meter solar and storage project at a community center, at a school, at a multifamily property, at an individual customer's home, is not only can that battery's kind of charge and discharge cycle be optimized to take up this excess solar that could be produced in the middle of the day, can be discharged, of course, again when the demand spikes in the evening and the sun goes down. But localized assets can help resolve localized grid constraints in a way that centralized storage assets, for example, cannot. Right? If we have a core concentration of storage assets on an individual feeder or portion of the utility's low voltage system, we can actually help them manage very granular, location-specific kind of planning and operational challenges related to solar production or overproduction, related to other kind of thermal management and capacity issues, which is really cool. So kind of building from that framework, one of the other really interesting kind of product and service categories we're seeing kind of behind the meter or distributed batteries being very useful at providing is something called a capacity product. So this is essentially, in California, we look at it as kind of an insurance product. We call it resource adequacy, which folks may be very well familiar with, so I don't want to bore you to tears if this is all review for folks on the call. But it's essentially ensuring that you have the availability of a resource that can push electrons onto the grid or reduce net consumption of electrons at a time when the grid is anticipated to be experiencing a fair amount of stress. So high load, load generation or low availability of power to serve that load. So partnering with CCAs and other folks, we were able to say, how can this portfolio of battery resources be used to create this product that creates this critical kind of grid reliability and resiliency outcome, just like we're delivering resiliency for the individual customer too. And that's been really exciting for us to explore.
And I think that's a really great perspective of thinking about the systematic view of thinking how does the solar plus storage system could provide all kinds of resilience and reliability services and values to the system. So I'm looking at the chat box and I think a couple of the questions are probably related to another perspective of those issues, which is from the customer perspective. One of the questions we're touching upon, what are the particular risks if you apply those products and services to the low and moderate income communities? And the other one was asking about if you're dealing with the homeowners, what are the credit risks, or how does the kind of the risk allocation work when you really work with individual kind of homeowners or different kind of customers? So could you touch upon a little bit on that?
Yeah, I can start, or Dawn, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So a lot of questions within those questions, and I feel like we could probably spend easily a half an hour talking about project finance and credit risk and underwriting and all that stuff, which would probably bore everybody but me and a couple of folks who are asking the questions on the call. The short story, at least from Sunrun's perspective, is we typically are going to be selling customers a product via PPA or a lease, an energy product, so kilowatt hour of energy, that is at or below the cost of the incumbent utility power, right? So we sell solar and storage as a cost savings product the majority of the time. And we wouldn't sell to customers that we are not able to deliver a savings product to, again, the majority of the time. So the customer knows exactly what they're getting up front. It's kind of a locked in price for power over a 20 or 25 year contract with us. So that gives them certainty, which is really good. We do have certain credit requirements that we need to make sure folks meet. Typically, this means the vast majority of customers will qualify from a credit perspective. Folks at the very low end of the credit spectrum, unfortunately, that's just a credit risk that we have difficulty financing. But again, that's a minority of folks. Really, the barriers that we end up seeing in terms of not being able to bring a product to folks who want it really are around safety of installability. So is the customer's roof safely installable? Does it get enough sun that the solar will actually produce the anticipated amount of power? Because if it doesn't, then we'd be paying, the customer would not necessarily be saving money. And that would be a good deal. So that's kind of how we would approach it on the single family side. Multifamily, this gets a little bit more interesting, a little bit more complex, but the simple story is we would sign a PPA or a lease contract with the property owner. So this could be an owner or a manager of one or more multifamily residential properties, right? So they typically have, again, strong credit picture. They, again, have multiple properties under their set of responsibilities. We would sign a PPA with them. The credit for the solar that's being generated gets allocated to individual customers who live at that property via a bill credit using a virtual net energy metering tariff. And it gets kind of a little bit more complicated from there, but the short story is, again, the financeability is based on the counterparty that we sign the PPA with, which is the property owner in the case of a multifamily project. And again, customers are guaranteed a bill savings based on the virtual net energy metering tariff, for example, that we have in California. So 51% or more of the solar produced at that facility has to go directly to tenant bill savings, which means everybody is saving money as a result of living in the building where the solar is. So it's a pretty good deal, actually, for customers.
Yeah, I would add one thing. For our low-income customers, income-qualified customers on our energy storage program, they are actually able to avoid any type of credit surge or credit issues altogether because we're applying for S-chip funds on their behalf, which for equity customers covers almost 100% of the cost of the installation. And then MCE is offering up gap funding to cover the balance. We also provide upfront funding to cover the time between when the S-chip rebate comes in for the customer, so they're not needing to put up upfront money. So that helps with our equity customers, our income qualified customers. So I wanted to put that out there. We also provide gap funding for general market customers that are applying, so that can help with the cash flow issues as well. And then I wanted to also respond to one of the other questions in the chat. There was a question about, what do we do if there's an emergency and then we've depleted the battery because we're trying to shift load during the day. And I wanted to respond to that to say that was actually a big concern that I had when we were launching this program. I wanted to make sure that we weren't running into that problem. And fortunately, there's some really good software tools out there that we're beginning to incorporate into our system through an open ADR platform that allows us to kind of shift into emergency mode where a battery stops sucking up energy in the middle of the day and putting it all on the grid at night. But if it's in emergency mode, if we have a extreme weather event on the horizon, if there's an announcement of a possible PSPS event, we simply put that battery into energy saving mode. So it's getting fully charged and waiting for an emergency to hit so that it can fully deploy and then recharge itself every day from the sun and not be used for that type of arbitrage we talked about earlier. So it's easy to set things up automatically to flip the switch and cover emergencies. That, of course, is the priority. It doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it is the priority. So I just want to clarify that that's something that I think we've taken care of at the front end and hopefully won't be an issue going forward.
That's very much a use case that is front of mind for us too. Yeah, I think you again very clearly spelled out really how do we operationalize the resiliency product in the context of a system emergency. That is exactly what we do. So we typically reserve a portion of the battery at all times for customer critical load backup in case an outage occurs without any advanced warning, so that customers can have critical circuits of their home backed up, refrigerator, lights, garage door opener, internet. And then if there is an extended outage, again, the system islands from the larger grid. The solar powers the home, recharges the battery discharges when the sun goes down. And we've actually had customers, and this is kind of a dubious achievement because it bespeaks a pretty challenging grid condition in PG&E service territory. But the wildfires we had last year, we had a customer on uninterrupted for I think 173 consecutive hours, and that's just one example. There are many of that type, but that's just the one that I looked up recently to give you a good statistic. But that kind of self-islanding from the larger grid and kind of keeping the customer in power in the event of a prolonged disruption is something that, again, localized distributed solar and storage projects are particularly well positioned to deliver.
Great. I'm aware we're about more than half away, and there are still a couple of really awesome questions. I'm noticing that a couple of them are asking around the economics of different technologies. So on that front, I want to probably broaden our scope a little bit. We've talked about a lot of the specific risk and also programs that MCE have established in California. But if we're thinking about kind of scaling some of those best practices outside of California to other states or regions where the economics might not be as favorable as in the Bay Area or elsewhere in California, are there any other what other best practices or lessons learned you want to share with customers or developers or utilities in those areas? And also the second question I would have is if there are any enabling policies that could be kind of scaling those adoptions, what would be the ones that you think are most important?
Michael, do you want to go first on that one?
Oh man, I feel like I could again spend the next 20 minutes talking about that. I don't know. Break it down into bite-sized pieces. I don't know. Interconnection tariffs where you can actually get resources tied to the grid in a time and cost-effective manner. Critical. If it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars just to get the utility to approve putting a solar and battery system, on the grid, that's pretty tough. That's a pretty big barrier. I'd say California's experience can be really instructive there. I actually was at PG&E for a number of years before I joined Sunrun. And when I was leaving PG&E, we were just kind of emerging from this net energy metering kind of permitting, multi-year, multi-car pileup on the highway kind of scenario where there's just this giant backlog in the interconnection queue, which is finally getting resolved. And I think that was largely a result of policymakers really pushing the utilities to create faster, more cost-effective and efficient kind of interconnection study and related process parameters. So that really helped. So good, clean, clear interconnection is important. I would say other enabling policies to create a useful, kind of value proposition for the customer, making sure that there's a path to delivering a resiliency product, making sure that the solar and storage provider doesn't have to qualify as a utility, for example, which we're seeing in some jurisdictions. That seems a little wild to us, right? Whole different level of kind of regulatory compliance and requirement specified there, when all we're really doing is helping a customer, generate their own power and use it for on-site usage and push some of it back onto the grid, when the generation exceeds their on-site demand, right? You don't have to be a utility to do that, I wouldn't think. Those are two key things. When you think about grid services or other kind of value delivery opportunities, which really would allow us to scale a business and diversify the customer value prop. And when I say customer, it's the utility or load serving entity or wholesale market, kind of participant value prop. It's paths to market, right? How can we develop the product and tariff architecture or opportunities for delivering value that tell us, here's what batteries are useful doing in this service territory, this area. Here's how they will be compensated for doing it. Here's how you can help us solve problems. I think about the kind of the grid services concept. I think it's, how do distributed devices working in concert help grid managers solve problems? And if we can't even kind of have a conversation around that, it becomes very difficult to figure out how we participate. But if we do, and if we can, it becomes a really fun and vibrant discussion. So one of the things that I think we're all going to be paying pretty careful attention to is implementation of FERC Order 2222. Right, this kind of is, at least on its face, supposed to level the playing field for participation of, distributed energy resource aggregations in all types of wholesale markets. That is super exciting, right? And the key for us will be, do ISOs and RTOs, these are transmission system operators, look to meet the letter or the spirit of the requirement? Because you can create tariffs and paths to market that are impossible to use and generate no value, and you can say, okay, I checked the box, but it's, are you really motivated to bringing resources, into a bulk power system planning and operational cadence? And if you are, then there's really cool stuff that you can do.
And I would just add that I think there's value in solar plus storage already across the U.S. And one of the key reasons is we're all seeing more extreme weather events, and we need to be able to be resilient across the country for multiple days of power outages. And that's kind of I don't know if it's priceless, but it's worth a lot to be able to know that you can keep your power on, especially if you have medical needs, health needs that rely on electricity, and or you need it for heating and cooling and your food to stay fresh. So there's already a lot of value. As far as what's needed, I think that the SGIP funds that have been made available in California have been extremely valuable, especially those that are targeted towards the equity sector. We saw in the early days of solar adoption, it was the wealthy customers that could afford to be early adopters. Our lower income customers wanted to, but couldn't afford it. And we're seeing the same is happening with storage. And we think it's really important to make sure that as we develop new policies across the country for green energy and reducing our carbon footprint, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we don't want to replicate the same patterns of disenfranchising our lower income customers. We want to change the paradigm so that we are making sure that those folks are given the first advantage, the first opportunity to become part of the green economy and help reduce their carbon footprint while saving money and being more resilient. And so the equity funds that were available through SGIP were a great way to achieve that goal, but they've run out already. And there's a need for more equity dollars so that our most vulnerable customers can be taking advantage of these solar storage opportunities. And I think that's important in California and across the country.
Totally agreed. Incentive programs can really help kind of broaden the base of customers and types of assets that we can install nationwide. You know, I like to think that, you know, the industry can also deliver a lot of value even in an unsubsidized way. But that said, if we really want to keep the conversation focused and centered on equity and accessibility, I would totally agree that, you know, incentive funds can certainly help us engage more folks more equitably, more quickly. So I would completely agree with Dawn's points there.
I think we're almost around time for Dawn and Michael for their sharing all the excellent project experience, also the brilliant ideas. In terms of the follow-up, I'm sure we will definitely have all the other conversations, not just constrained to this half an hour. And I think we will be able to make this recording available to the folks who need it, but I'll also encourage folks who have other questions to follow up with us afterwards. I'm sure we'll be able to share all those contact informations with you guys as needed. Any final thoughts or ideas you want to share with the audience, Dawn and Michael?
No, I would just like to say I really appreciate the enthusiasm of all the folks that have joined, the great questions, and folks are welcome to follow up to learn more about MCE's energy storage and resiliency programs on our website. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, very much the same. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate the great engagement and questions. This is a really fun dialogue for us to be a part of. You know, feel free to reach out to me offline if you guys would like. We can chat about product and service options. You know, I think we're going to continue to grow and scale in this space in a really interesting way. We're going to keep the focus centered on equity and inclusion. And we really just appreciate the involvement from the folks here. And thanks, Becky and team, for giving us the opportunity to join the conversation today.
Have a great time.